Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergog, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at how Runecraft, the ancient magic of the dwarves, worked, and how it was almost destroyed, and how Ainz Ooal revived it. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as a thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. When the history of Runecraft truly began is unknown, only that among the dwarves it had a long and likely multifaceted tradition. A tradition that would have been unchanged to this very day. And neither would the Dwarven Kingdom have weakened so severely, nor would so many dwarves have turned away from it, if it were not for the great catastrophe that strikes the world roughly every 100 years, shaking its very foundation. About once every century, beings of unfathomable power appear in the New World. Why this happens, whether it truly stems from a failed ritual of the Dragon Lords that summoned them, what exactly the connection between world items and wild magic and players is, and how it all came to be, we simply do not know. But we do know this: the players were enormously powerful, and their world items lost none of their potency. Some of these items even possessed effects capable of changing the world itself. Ouroboros, for example, was essentially a superior version of Wish Upon a Star, already an unbelievably powerful spell, capable of making the impossible possible. For Ouroboros could alter the rules, the fundamental logic by which the world of Yggdrasil functioned. Thus, in the New World, this item allowed its wielder to bend and break the very laws of nature and reality according to their own will. And 5 elements overcoming, another world item, could directly change the magic system itself. There were also numerous other immensely powerful items with similar potent effects, 18 more to be exact. Which of these items altered the logic of the world, or whether the arrival of the players themselves was responsible, we simply do not know. But what does seem certain is that the players, who later would found the theocracy of Slain, and who are still worshipped there as gods to this very day, were the first to introduce tier magic to the New World. In doing so, they laid the groundwork for the displacement of wild magic, the original form of the world's magic system. 100 years later, when the 8 kings of Everest conquered the entire continent with ease, they further spread tier magic during their short and civil war-ended reign. Thus, a competing system to wild magic was established. And after the arrival of tier magic, wild magic became far more difficult to use, not only for the dragons, but likely for the other great beings of the world as well. And this may already have been the first reason why Runecraft declined within the Dwarven realm. For Runecraft might just be another aspect of wild magic. It might be tied to the fundamental power of this world, and thus it was also weakened by the arrival of tier magic. So from the perspective of the dwarves, Runecraft might have suddenly become inexplicably harder to use, driving up costs and pushing some dwarves to look for alternatives. The next great turning point for rune magic came with the attack of one of the so-called evil deities, an army of demons and demon lords, led by mighty generals over whom a demon king reigned. These forces ravaged the world beyond the mountains of Silesia as well, dragging countless nations into ruin, dust, and ash. Even the capital of the Dwarven Kingdom, Feoberkana, was not spared, despite it being deep in the very mountains. The royal family lost many members, though not its ruler, and while the capital was evacuated and golem guardians were set up to ward off lesser monsters, and the treasury vault was sealed away, the Dwarven King joined the so-called 13 Heroes, a group consisting of far more than just 13 members, including the undead, such as the undead vampire princess Evil Eye, and even the armor of Platinum Dragonlord. and the sheer size of the splendid buildings in the capital testify to this very day of the former power and wealth of the dwarves, both of which would begin to rapidly dwindle over the next 200 years. Whether it was the mighty beings in the mountains, the evil deities themselves, or merely a whim of the mana-soaked world, we don't know. But the road to the former dwarven capital was cut off by a great chasm and other natural dangers, and so there was never a return to the old capital. The Quagoa, more like beastmen, and later the very frost dragons of Silesia, claimed the city for themselves, and only Ainz succeeded in finally reclaiming it by subjugating both. After the Dwarven King departed to fight alongside the 13 heroes, a council was also established in his stead, and this council was made up of the members of the various guilds, the military and economic leaders, and was meant to govern the land until the king returns. Unfortunately, it did not happen, and therefore no dwarf thereafter ever claimed the royal title for himself. And this council, while it worked for over 200 years, just managed rather than ruled, and so a phase of stagnation set in, but also one of outward openness. We know, for example, that the young Barut Empire and the dwarves have signed a friendship and trade agreement, and with this trade came the spread of tier magic into the Dwarven Kingdom, especially considering that a young Fluda Paradane had already become court mage of the Empire, and while many dwarves at first still clung to rune magic, and a small part of them continued to practice this forge-bound sorcery even 200 years later, more and more dwarves turned to tier magic instead. And why not? Enchantments could now be completed far faster, without having to painstakingly inscribe the magic directly into the items during the forging process. Tier magic also made it possible to cast spells directly. In other words, instead of wielding an axe imbued with the lightning element and having to fight close up, some dwarves simply learned the third-tier spell Lightning, or one of its many variations, which proved highly effective against the heavily metallized bodies of the Quagoa. In short, there was a good reason why tier magic became more and more dominant. That does not mean, however, that no dwarves remained devoted to rune magic. Dwarves, such as Gondo Firebeard for instance, still sought to revive this ancient craft, but the number of dwarves who turned their focus to tier magic grew steadily, driven also by the ongoing war against the Quagoa. Another heavy blow to the Dwarven Kingdom and thus to Runecraft, that further pressured the dwarves and cost them yet another city, came from the conflict between the Frost Dragon Lord Olarsir Dark Halilial and one of his 3 mates, Munuina Ilislim. Their battle destroyed the settlement, forcing yet another evacuation to be taking place. What followed was a phase of acute decline, with the dwarves retreating into their last remaining stronghold, Feyuyera, after yet another city had to be evacuated because of the Quagoan onslaught. But with the arrival of Ainz Ooal, who saved them from the Quagoa and reclaimed the old capital of Feoberkana, as well as the strengthening of the dwarven economy through the use of undead labor, the nation was able to recover. Some dwarves even moved down into the lowlands, to the Sorcerer Kingdom's capital, to work in road construction. But before all of this happened, most of the runesmiths left. A feast was held in their honor, and afterwards they were resettled into the Sorcerer Kingdom, more precisely into the village of Karn, the same place where Henry once summoned a goblin army, which, technically speaking, makes it a town and not a village anymore. There the dwarven runesmiths worked in a designated forge house. At first, one could occasionally hear an explosion or two, but those incidents seemed to have settled down over time. What exactly the dwarves produced, we do not know yet, but we do know that Nea Baraha and Shizu Delta, though the start of the marketing campaign was rough to say the absolute least, did a great deal of promotional work for Runecraft in the Holy Kingdom. Of course, Nea's bow Ultimate Shooting Star Super and the sword Ainz Ooal once presented to the dwarves did not actually come from the New World, nor were they Runecraft items, but they were Yggdrasil Online items decorated with ornamental runes. But still, the very fact that the advertising was being done at all means that the craft had reached a stage of development where it was safe enough to be presented to the public, which is just common sense. Unless we're talking about most video games who arrive at market half finished, or if you're buying anything from the Skaven. But again, this in turn means Runecraft has been fully developed, and unlike graphic cards, was available also in sufficient numbers to justify attracting extra attention and potential customers to this promotional act. In other words, Ainz Ooal managed to identify a unique type of item, a unique type of magic, acquire the exclusive rights to it, and vertically integrate the entire production chain, from mining the ores with the skeletal labor, all the way to the manufacturing and distribution of the finished product. In short, 100% of the production line was now in the hands of the Sorcerer Kingdom. And considering that the Holy Kingdom now lies under Nea's control, a land traumatized by attacks from the demons and the demi-humans, it is very likely that everyone there will take a keen interest in the arms and the armor of the kingdom that saved them from what seemed certain doom. The domestic market of the Sorcerer King will also play a crucial role in boosting sales, because this stuff will be marketed to adventurers like every single day from now on. Moreover, with the current military reforms in the Baharut Empire, a nation now reduced to a mere vassal state of the Sorcerer Kingdom, it is almost certain that out of duty, fear, or simply because Runecraft magic is very useful, parts of their swords and armor will be crafted with rune enchantments from now. And therefore ordered from Ainz Ooal's Sorcerer Kingdom. And I think that there is yet another important market here, the Dragon Kingdom. Because we know that under Draudilon Auriculus, this Dragon Kingdom also supported and signed the Sorcerer King's declaration of war against the Kingdom of Riestais. The question is, of course, why? Well, I believe Draudilon Auriculus had already received aid she was in dire need of, since the Empire was now the de facto part of the Sorcerer Kingdom, while the Theocracy of Slain had not sent a single scripture in its defense. The Beastmen made remarkable progress on the territory of the Dragon Kingdom, killing and eating hundreds of thousands of people. Draudilon herself also lamented that even if she had plenty of money, it could not be transformed into real military strength instantly and without outside help. So what better, what more brilliant form of aid could the Dragon Queen receive than arms and armor crafted with runes, magical armor, every single piece of it. This would be undoubtedly an extreme boost to the fighting power of the badly overstretched and undersupplied Dragon Kingdom's military. After all, even the Empire, despite being fairly rich and powerful, had never possessed enough resources and money to outfit even a single legion fully with magical equipment and armor. For the Sorcerer Kingdom, however, supplying several thousand troops with rune-crafted gear should pose no problem. Resources that would provide an immediate and direct military benefit to the Dragon Kingdom. And as a pleasant side effect, these free samples would not only allow the Sorcerer Kingdom to exert political influence over the Dragon Kingdom, but also secure a potential long-term customer eager to buy more of its magical weaponry. Thus, Runecraft was ultimately spared from extinction, and has likely regained great popularity and even surpassed its old user base by far, thanks to the help of the Sorcerer Kingdom. And with that said, now it's your turn. What do you think about Runecraft, its history, and how it became a trademark, pun intended, of the Sorcerer Kingdom? Let me know it down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to all Patreons for supporting this channel, and as usual, I say my special thanks to Arder Daddy Arder, ASK, Bad Guy Yee, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley0221, Seer, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placidus Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feral Shivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Le Louche Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Loverazor, Merowek, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.